Hey guys, Quiv the Lazy Geek here, and today we're going to talk about processing. Why will we talk about processing? Because it's raining like crazy outside, so I cannot go paragliding and I cannot do astrophotography, so I'm stuck doing processing. And for that we're going to use some narrowband data that I collected last year, back in January. And narrowband is something that I hate processing. But it is the only way to really get nice pictures from a very light polluted area. So you can actually refer to my video where I set up my narrowband filters and monochrome camera as I'm basically getting myself ready for the Milky Way season in late summer. And you can see how that looks like. But basically, narrowband is where you use filters and the light from your target passes through the filter, and the filter only lets a specific wavelength pass through, or you could say it lets a specific color pass through. And you can, most narrowband imaging will use wavelength called hydrogen alpha, or H alpha, or HA, sulfur 2, or S2, and oxygen 3, or O3, which are often emitted by those emission nebulas, so they're very easy to capture. And then you can combine them into a color image. So if you look at my screen right now, I have like 3 images, like H alpha here, O3 here, and S2 here, and those are from the same target from January last year, the Seagull Nebula. It's called the Seagull Nebula, and it's very low on the horizon, so it's actually very difficult to capture because of all the smog that is in Tokyo, and the light pollution gets stronger the lower on the horizon the object is. So this is a very delicate object to capture from here, very difficult. But I've captured 24 hours worth of data on that object. So it was not a single night type of capture. It was across many nights on the same object across multiple narrowband filters with my monochrome camera. And this is the result of each of my monochrome images through each of the filters, sulfur 2, hydrogen alpha, and O3. Now, to combine those together, one of the most popular ways is to say that H alpha represents the green signal, oxygen 3 represents the blue signal, and sulfur 2 represents the red signal. It's not, a scientific process, it's just art. We've decided a convention, we've decided this is how we can blend the channels, but there's tons of ways to blend the channels. You could blend like hydrogen alpha and sulfur 2 together and say that's the red channel, and then you could do some weird blend of hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 for the green channel, and then just say the blue channel is oxygen 3. You can do any number of things, and none of them is wrong. Everything is correct, and that lets you know why I hate this process so much, because it is experimentation, it is art, and I am terrible at that. I like to do like a scientific process where I just do my photometric calibration and then I get my proper colors, but I cannot do that with narrowband, and that frustrates me so much, especially when I look at the pictures from emission nebula that were taken by the Hubble telescope, because typically they were taken using the exact same technique, the same filters that I'm using here, and they're using the same palette that I just mentioned, which is called the Hubble palette, or the SHO palette, which is sulfur is assigned to red, H alpha is assigned to green, oxygen 3 is assigned to blue. And then you do tons of manipulation, you use color masks, you do processing, and you end up with a beautiful like gold and turquoise or gold and blue image, which I have never, ever, ever been able to achieve. And let me show you the result of that. This is the result that I got after blending those 3 channels together. In French, we would call that criard, which means that the colors are too fluorescent, they hurt my eyes. Precious. So it's not a good result. It's not bad, but it's not good. And I've never gotten the hang of actually doing proper narrowband combination and processing. Now, I've had one of my subscribers actually reached out to me and sent me videos about how to do narrowband processing. I have looked at them and I will try. I haven't tried yet because I found another methodology that was completely new to me and something I had never heard of before, which is a dynamic type of blending. And this comes from a Nina Discord forum user, or not forum, but chat user called Forax, and he made that tutorial there, which I will put a link in the description below, so please definitely have a look there, where he describes, you know, the standard basic combinations, like, as I was mentioning, sulfur 2, hydrogen alpha, and O3 in each of the channels, or you could do a combination of S2, H alpha, and O3, you know, kind of like play with it. And I hate playing with things. And, or you could use, instead of those factors that we had here, where I have 0.6 times sulfur 2, 0.4 times H alpha, instead of using that, we could be using the images themselves as factors for the combination. You can see here, instead of having factors like 0.7 or 0.3, we have O3 multiplied by S2, and then we do some weird stuff and we still have some factors in there. And there's a logic behind it, which is, one, complicated, and two, very artsy again. So it's hard for me to actually manipulate those parameters. But you know what? Let's just try that method with exactly those parameters as expressed here, without trying to change them, because I am terrible at that, and see what we can achieve from that. So here I am in PixInsights, but this is not specific to PixInsights. You can do this kind of manipulation normally in any software, including like Photoshop or APP, I would assume. I don't know, I'm not an expert. And the first thing you would do is that there's many ways you can do narrowband combination. You can first stretch your images. So right now my images here, they're linear. They've had their background extracted, which is basically getting rid of the gradients caused by light pollution, for example, using the dynamic background extraction tool in PixInsights. And you can see that if I look at them normally, they all appear black. This is because they're in the linear stage. They still represent exactly the number of photons that hit, well, not exactly, but they represent, they're a representation of the number of photons that hit each of the pixels of my camera. And so they're still linear. If I stretch them, we'll basically make them get to a level that's similar to how the human eye auto stretches images that come to it every second, and we'll get something like this. But right now my images are linear, and many of the blending processes use linear images to do the blending. So what I'll do, instead of doing linear processing, is I'll do stretch processing, which means that I first stretch my images and then I will combine them using pixel math in PixInsights. So to do this stretching, I always use the masked stretch process in PixInsights, because one, I know it works, two, I'm familiar with it, and three, it tends not to saturate star cores, which is always nice. And I typically have a target background of 0.16, and the upper limit, I will simply use this sampling tool in PixInsights and just like go around like the background and look at the figure here at the bottom, the K figure here, and see that it's roughly 0.015, whatever. And I take a value that's a bit above that. And if I look at the background for each of my images, it's more or less the same. So I'll be able to use the same masked stretch parameters for each of the images. So let me just do that right now. I'll just apply it to each image one after another. And here we are. We have our images stretched. So now, without any, screen transfer function in PixInsights, without any preview needed, we can actually see how the images look like. And the next step is actually to make those images have roughly the same mean as one another, so that they will have roughly the same brightness as one another. And to do that, I'm going to use the statistics tool in PixInsights, but again, it should be possible with other systems. So I'm going to look at the H alpha here, and we can see that median is 737 and mean is 817. So I'll try to achieve that. Let's look at S2. It's lower than that. So I'm going to stretch S2 a bit so that the mean medium will be around 750, something like that. And to do that, I'll just use curves transformation. And so let me open curves transformation. This is very similar to what we have in Photoshop or other software. And I'm going to use RGBK, which is the default for curves transformation. And to stretch, I just grab the middle point there and go upper left like this. And so I'm just going to try to apply that to S2 and see how it stretched the image. And right now it has stretched it maybe a bit too much. We're above 800. I want to be roughly like in between the mean and the median of the H alpha, so around 750. So I'm going to stretch a bit less. And now we're at 760, which I think should be fine for S2. And let's do the same thing for O3. And I'll try to stretch maybe a little tiny bit less. There we are. And let's see what that gives us. 739, a bit too little, so let's stretch slightly more and see what happens. 750. Okay, this is roughly the level that I'm looking for. So now we'll have S2, O3, and H alpha. And we are going to use exactly the parameters here that are in the tutorial from Forax. And that's because I don't like messing with values, as you know. And okay, so I have a pixel math instance pre-prepared with exactly those formula there. And I'll just be able to, so it's saying we're going to use this as the blending parameters. And again, those are complicated and I don't understand them well. And they're, artsy, and there's art behind the idea. And there's like, oh, we want this color to be like that, that color to be like that kind of reasoning, which is something that I am absolutely terrible at. Also, I'm wanting to create a new image that will be in the RGB color space. And let's do that. And let's look at how this looks like. And now we have an image which is of a color that I haven't really seen for this nebula before. Before we're gonna we start doing things about this image, one thing that is missing from this image is a luminance channel. A luminance channel is something that adds details and I would call it relief in French. Some like not 3D, but like it adds definition to your image. It makes it pop a little bit. And because for this particular nebula, H alpha has the strongest signal, I will be using H alpha to give luminance to that particular image. And for that, I will open up the LRGB combination tool in PixInsights and check only L, assign it to H alpha, and just apply it to my image here. And after a while we are done, and we can see that it is a big difference, right? So from here, which is only the color information really, to there, there's a big difference, right? The structure of the nebula is far more defined than it used to be. For other nebula with a bigger, like O3 or S2 kind of structure, I could do a blend of multiple images of the monochrome elements of the image together, use that as my luminance filter. Okay, and the next step we're going to do is we're going to do curves transformation. And this is where we get into the artsy part of things and where I am absolutely terrible. And it seems that for narrowband combinations, there is no way to get past the artsy side of things, unfortunately. So I'm going to use several things. First, I'm going to amp up the saturation of my image. So I'm open up the preview of my image here, amp up the saturation so I see kind of what I'm doing here. That we can see there's a lot of green in there, so we'll probably want to fix that. We're gonna want to also amp up a bit the general luminosity of the image so that again I can see, and the contrast as well, so I see a bit more what I'm doing. So preview off, on. So this pops out a bit more, and then we'll want to play with the hue. And the hue curve is a curve, when I use it, I have no idea what it's actually doing mathematically speaking, and sometimes it makes absolutely no sense to me. but let's play with it. And this is what I mean by experimentation and art. And I hate what I'm about to do. So it goes against all the... I hate doing that, but you can see by moving this curve, we are changing the colors of the nebula. And I don't want to get too green in there, so I might actually move this point as well. You know, see what's happening. So I'm messing around. That's pretty much all that I'm doing. So by choosing this point, I can see that I'm affecting mostly the background. If I put it up, the background becomes red or magenta. If I drag it down, it becomes green. Neither is very pleasant, so I want to find like a middle ground, and the middle ground seems to be this. Why not? You know, what does this process do? Is it accurate? Is this something that makes sense scientifically speaking? Does it actually use the colors? But I have no idea. I have no clue. And that's something that really, really annoys me with that. And this one, it seems to be doing something weird to the edges of the nebula. That like this, you can see the edges there are magenta. And if I pull this up, it's like becomes blue. So I don't want to play too much with that. I want to keep it to more towards that nice kind of orange type of color that I'm seeing here. And then we can see like, okay, if I add a point here, oh, nice, I can actually make this more orange like that. I kind of like this orange kind of color to that nebula. I really like the color palette that I'm getting. I just hate the way that I'm using to get to that color palette. But still, like we get the blue, we get some green, and I kind of like having green. I know people try to get rid of green from their images at all costs, from their narrowband images. I don't mind it that much actually. So I zoomed in, oops, I don't want to do that. I zoomed in a bit on the image, and something like this doesn't look too bad. The blue is almost turquoise, right? Or turquoise, I have no idea how to pronounce that. I think it's a French word to start with, so I'll just pronounce it turquoise. And you know, I kind of like the colors that I'm getting right now. So this is before, this is after. Yeah, I think this is not bad. I like this this color palette here. And so I'm just going to apply that to my image. Maybe I could try messing around a bit more. What happens? Yeah, no, I'm not going to mess around a bit more. I think I'm getting a decent result as it is, as you heard from my very panicked cry when I did that. And I'm going to apply that to the image. And now we are done with my curves. We've done the transformation. We have colors that I kind of like. We could always make them even better with further curves transformations. So I could, like, you know, kind of play around some more and try to get rid of the green if I don't like green. But I happen to actually like green, so I'll just keep it like that. And then we can do all sorts of typical transformation for this type of image. So I could, for example, extract the luminance of that image, apply it, invert my mask, and then do some curves transformation with the saturation of the curve. So with that, I basically have like the color combination, the narrowband combination actually done. I'm gonna do a little bit more processing on the image, but it will be like color saturation and, you know, increasing the sharpness of the image, noise reduction, that kind of stuff. And the topic of this video is more about this like weird or like novel to me kind of color combination technique. And then I'll show you the end results. And that's pretty much it for today. So this is how, well, not I do narrowband combination, but that's like my first attempt at narrowband combination. So using this image there with this particular dynamic kind of pixel math operation. I kind of like the way that it looks. Of course, narrowband combination, it's all about art. So it's very subjective. And, you know, people might like this color scheme, people might not like this color scheme, and then there's other, you know, color processes that are possible. But that's pretty much it. So it's first time I see this method. I hope it can be a method that is useful to you. So don't forget to look at the link in the description below to learn more about it, especially how it works and how it can be tweaked. And thank you so much for watching, as always. Please let me know in the comment if you have any suggestions or comments about how to process narrowband images. But otherwise, again, thank you so much. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.